Good evening. Yeah, sometimes I spit, so don't come too close to the front apparently. Stay as far back as you can so you're not near the spit zone. We're going to get going tonight as we talk about social media. As we talked this morning, we talked about in 2 Corinthians a few different places where we see Paul talking to people who are following Jesus, and he's trying to repattern their minds. So we've been in this series on renewal and been paying attention to kind of how we renew our minds. Paul's very serious about how we do that and the ways that we look at not just what goes on inside our minds, but the things we allow to come into them, the things we allow from the outside to become part of what we're thinking. And I think it's important for us to stop and kind of evaluate. One of the things that right now in our culture is one of the biggest things going into our minds. On a daily basis, social media is something we're spending enormous amounts of time on. It's something that I believe has kind of flipped from where we had control of it at one point to it having control of us, if we're being completely honest. I think it's something that's taken over a lot of our thought processes and a lot of our own mental capacity. And so we want to kind of look at that and say, what are we doing with that? Like, what is the real story behind that? Is this a positive thing for us? Is this something we should be investing as much time, as much energy into as we really do in our society? Right now, different YouTube channels, just so you know, like there was a goal that YouTube set when they first started up. That was to get people on YouTube collectively around the world for 1 billion collective hours a day on YouTube. That 1 billion hours would be spent on YouTube every day, and they hit that goal a few years ago, and it's only gotten worse. So, I mean, things that we're looking at, the things we're taking in on media, it's just happening so much to us. I don't even know that we've really thought about it, or we take time sometimes to stop and look at it and evaluate it. I think we just kind of let it happen, and we're like, well, that's what it is, right? That's what everybody's doing. Instead of saying, is this a good idea? Is it something we should be doing? Or is this just something that is a possibility for us? So tonight we're just going to talk about that with a few people that kind of know more than I do about these things and are living in worlds a little bit closer to that. So tonight Gary's going to be sharing as he's a counselor. He does mental health counseling, and so I'm excited for him to share about that from his point of view. Andrew is a vice principal at a middle school, where right now that's the thick of this stuff. That's where this gets picked up and taken, is from middle school. And Jenessa is going to be sharing too from what she does in the community with One Community Now, and the neighborhoods she works with, and the kids that she works with, specifically in Pasco County, because the kids she's working with have, we just see more and more kids that are being given unrestricted internet access on phones, on devices, and what that's doing to our community. So I'm going to invite them to come on up here and have a seat, and I'm just going to ask them a bunch of questions tonight. We're going to kind of hear from them as we go through this, so we can all evaluate this whole thing. So if you guys would come on up here, and I saved you seats, don't worry, right here. And if you just hit the button on these. Yeah, right. So now you're like all by yourself, Aaron, sorry.
I'm still here.
Kelly's still a person, Aaron. No, Kelly's still a person. She still counts as a person.
I found the fourth seat.
Yeah. So tonight, I think one of the things I want to talk about real quick as we go through this and as we begin, because if you hit the button on those, one of the things that I think where we started with this, like I think about when I started with social media, there was a reason for it at the time. Like, I think we all, if we're being honest with ourselves, we want social connection. That's something that's important to humans, right? Social connection is something we need. And I think where we started with social media was a way to meet social connections in a positive way. I don't know that it's still doing that, but I think there's something in us. And I wanted to start there for just a second, especially if Gary, you can speak to what you see, especially with people that you deal with. But in that need for social connection that maybe every human has, or at least that you see being a frequent thing, have you seen that play out, and in what ways are we craving social connection?
I just think of different people I see and talk with, but I guess one of the things is long distance family. It really has served great for that. If you have family living somewhere else in the world or in the cross country or whatever, a different state, you can stay connected that way. So I think that's a positive connection. The YouTube thing, I don't know how that quite, but I was just thinking, one time where our washer broke and Kelly was able to look up on YouTube on how to fix it. and then fixed our washer. So, you know, there was a
Yes.
usefulness
Yes.
there. I don't know. The connection was between her and the washer, though. There wasn't a social connection there, but
It's still powerful, you
yeah,
know?
if you've ever tried to change a headlight,
Yeah.
that's not my wheelhouse thing. You can look it up on YouTube, you know. So there's useful things there.
Yeah, and now Kelly and the washer are closer than they've ever been, really.
Yeah.
It's really a beautiful story that came out of that relationship. Yeah, and I think when we deal with that, you know, I was thinking about like when I started using social media, I'm old now, and when I first was using Facebook, it was back when you had to have a .edu email address. You may remember these days? It had to just be through, you had to be in college, you had to have a .edu to even sign up for it. And so I was in college, I had a .edu, and I signed up for it. And I remember we had just moved from one part of the country to another part of the country, and we thought, like, this is how we're gonna keep up with people. That's what it was for. It was basic, right? It was like a good thing where it was like, that way people still know what we're up to and what we're doing. And so I think there was like a time where that was actually, I think that was how it started. I think there is a need for that. I think we all experience need for social connection. You guys know with younger people, I'm sure you're seeing the need for social connection more and more as in adolescence. Is there anything, I mean, that you want to add to that or what you're seeing with that?
Yes, for sure. I mean, I think kids, before social media, before Facebook and things like that, kids would have their social interaction at school, and they have their time with their friends, and they come home and there's like a stopping point to it, right? Where now it's just all the time. And so that need and that craving for that social interaction is just constant. And I would say, I don't know if you're seeing this, but even more of that social time is actually happening at home over social media and all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a Title I school, about 1,700 kids, pre-K through 8, and our school starts at 8:50. I'll get there at 7:45 sometimes, and there's already 20 kids out in front of the school. 8:15, there's a couple hundred, and these are like little babies up to 8th grade. They all want to connect. Some come early for that reason, because they want to connect to somebody, and they don't have a safe place in their neighborhood, they don't have a safe place at home where all their buddies can come and hang out, so they want to connect there. People are always like, how do you let that happen? And I just tell people, hey, we're not watching your kids, because we can't legally till 8:50, but they come and things happen, and they look for connection. And then they go home, and they still want that same connection they had at school, and they want that little thing they had in the morning. And so they reach to social media, and if the parents allow them, they're up to 11, 12, 13. We'll do military time. But then they come in the next morning with the drama that happened the night before, and they weren't being monitored. And the connection is strong then, because it's a fight, or it's something that the emotions are generated through the devices and through the applications, and then they walk on grounds, and they don't think they're real. And then when they see each other, pow, it's real, and 10 other people know about it too. And so sometimes they get themselves involved in a conflict that they wouldn't want to have happen, but now a mob mentality is taking place that's not physical, it's like an etherical application world, and then it comes into the school or it comes into the family and it just takes over, and then it's time for the adults to teach everybody how to play again.
Yeah. And it is fascinating, the social parts that were only in human interaction, like it had to happen within human to human, are now taking place like all day, all night. They're taking place like constantly. Instead of just when it was like you were at school, you had your social time, you left, and then it kind of became time for you to disengage. Now it's almost you engage more, right, when you're at home, because all your friends are on all the apps, all the things are happening, right? And so it's almost harder to get away from it than it's ever been. It's hard to leave what happened at school, because school comes with you because you have a device, right? I mean, is that what we're seeing?
I can tell you the most tears that we get, and the most crying and the most upset is when this happens and you go ahead and take it. And they hand it over, and they've either given it to me or the parent, and they're bawling. And it's like they've lost their best friend, and the parent, and finally a parent will be like, okay, I'm gonna take this phone, and you're not gonna have it for 2 weeks. And that's like, I could kick them out of school for 2 weeks, I don't mind. That's like, part of them's been cut off.
Yeah.
You know, and us ourselves, if you leave your phone at home, do you feel like, kind of
Yes.
like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
You know, I grew up when we had phones on the wall, and you left it there, and you came back, and if someone was home, you drove to their house, so they're not home, and you go back. That's what we do.
Right, yes.
It's changed.
Yes.
Yeah, and I would add on to that there's even like a social anxiety for the kids to not have it. Like they're gonna miss out on something because so much of the communication is happening while they're home. And even if it's like cyberbullying, like even if it's not healthy interaction, there's like this fear of like, but I have to be a part of it, I have to check in on it because what if someone is saying something mean or what if something hurtful? And so it just spirals. And so yeah, they lose their phone for a day. And I think it's even more than just oh, I don't have my phone with me. It's just, I'm going to be left out of my community. I'm going to be left out of my social group. And it is really scary for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think it's not as scary when they have a family that says, hey, you're not using this properly, okay? So we're taking away your license to drive for a while, and we're going to be home with you, and you're going to be with us. And they're like, ah. But I think when they know that they got a parent that cares and is doing that, they succeed after those moments of the discipline when they made a mistake with the phone or online. But the parents that are like, yeah, okay, but here's your phone, that we're encouraging them, hey, give the kid the phone back. The first thing to do is to give it back. And the same drama that we're trying to put out at school, be it a fight or a picture that was taken that's being sent around, it doesn't stop. Because we need everybody on board.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think when it comes to human interaction, if you've been around restoration, we talk about this a lot. I do believe we were created to have interaction with humans. I think we crave it. I think we desire that. Like it's natural within us to want to know other people and to be known by people. That's just who we are. Again, we talked about a little bit quickly this morning, but that there have been studies done on, again, how your brain perceives things. Your brain was made to be in connection with other people. It was made to be in love, like actually to have love with other people. It was not created to be living in fear or in anxiety. That's actually a learned behavior of your brain. But it was created to be in a loving relationship with other humans. That's what it was for. And what we see right now is in our current culture, in the culture we're in right now, there have been studies done saying that people who are alone, loneliness is as detrimental to your health as, it's more detrimental than obesity or heart disease. Actually, loneliness, being lonely, is as detrimental to your health as smoking 2 packs of cigarettes a day. That's by Forbes magazine. So they're publishing this saying that right now, if you are feeling like chronically lonely, it's detrimental to your health. So that what that shows us is the converse is true. Being in a relationship with people is actually good for your health, right? Like that means something's good there. The question I almost want to ask is like, is social media then, like the question is this the human interaction? Is this actually human interaction now? Does that make sense? Because I also see it leading to more anxiety and more loneliness. In our culture right now, there is more loneliness than there's ever been, but we have more ways to connect with people than ever before, right? We actually are at the highest levels of anxiety and loneliness that we've ever been. Right now, Generation Z is projected to be the loneliest generation on the face of the earth ever. And we have more ways to be connected. Like, I don't know if that's just because there's more ways to be rejected than ever before, where it's like, now it's like, it used to be like, you just didn't see your friend and like, well, their phone was busy that night or whatever. And like, now it's like, well, they didn't talk to me on FaceTime, they didn't send me a message on Skype, they didn't like my Instagram picture. So many ways to be rejected, it's hurtful.
Ghosted.
Yes, be ghosted, exactly. So there's so many ways to go through that, but I don't know if it's that, but I wonder, is it an actual human interaction, or is there something else going on? There's something that is a synthetic substitute for something that should be happening in our real lives. You've seen this, Gary, with like people almost feeling like their self-worth is dependent upon their social media status. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I've had people comment that they would post something and they would only get 6 likes, and they would be depressed. They literally would say, I'm depressed. And they would repost it and still not get very many likes. And they're in a state of sadness and despondent and, over whether someone likes something we post on social media. I mean, that's rational, irrational. That kind of sounds like on the side of the irrational, but we get so caught up into that cycle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, people's self-worth is now dependent upon that. So they can actually become depressed by something they put on Facebook or Instagram, whatever, and that's actually becoming their self-worth. We're seeing that happen. Like that's actually showing up in counseling. Just crazy, right? Yeah, that's where we live. Yeah.
I took a picture of my trash can the other night when I took the trash out, and that's the second time I've done it in years. And I just took a picture of my trash can and posted it on Facebook. That's kind of the rebel in me, that I should have created a hashtag, I got trash. Just let's rebel a little against this disturbing, element there that, you were living these fake lives through social media.
Yeah, we are. We're living, and that's the other thing is it creates a false persona of who we are, right? We can put out, this is who I am, the Instagram, the highlight reel of who we are instead of putting out who we actually are, right? Which becomes a whole nother conversation in that.
That's that other depressive element is we see, we only put our best. That's why I put the picture of the trash can on it. We always, you look at everybody else's social media and they're living the glamorous life and they put only their best stuff, and then we're sitting there looking at that, and then we look at our lives and like, oh man. And people are experiencing depression from that because they're in this comparison thing. But if we really could see beyond the social media, see that we human beings, just human beings,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
that we put up that nice front. So take pictures of your trash cans.
It's starting a movement right here.
Right here.
Of taking pictures of your trash cans, admitting you have trash.
Yeah, we got trash.
Yeah. Well, and to go back to what you guys were saying, I do want to go into that a little bit because I think especially as like parents, people that maybe, for us personally, there may be things in our social media that's one thing. For parenting other people or working with kids in this, one of the things that does terrify me. So we were at, I've mentioned it before because it was such a heralded thing. Was we saw this musical a few months ago now that was called Dear Evan Hansen. It was this whole thing that has been, I've read so many articles on it before we went to go see it because it was all about how this is a perfect replica of what's happening in high schoolers' lives all over the country. And the musical actually takes place as a high schooler. The main character is a high schooler who is, he is in high school, he has some depressive tendencies, he's starting to have this massive anxiety. And what's fascinating about the entire musical is from the start of the thing, you don't even really notice it as much, but there are screens across the entire stage. They're all different sizes, all different shapes, and they move as the musical goes on. They're all different places, but the whole time you can just see almost like opaque versions of YouTube or of Facebook or of Instagram or of blogs or of websites, and they're just there. They're just kind of opaquely in the background all the time. They never stop moving. There's Word documents that are being typed up. They're just kind of moving this whole internet is instantly moving behind him the entire time, almost the entire musical, until the very end when he kind of finds this clarity. And if you pay attention, they all go away, and it's just a sky, and he's just outside. But I think that the students that I see and that I worry about with my own kids, everybody, is there was a day where that background shadow wasn't there, right? So I picked up the newspaper told me the news, and then I would put the newspaper away until the next day, and the new news came out. Or I connected with somebody, I saw my neighbor, we talked, I left that conversation, and assumed that was the end of what my neighbor was saying or what was going on that day for my part of things, and then I just moved on with my life. Does that make sense? And now I feel like it's students, that's just the beginning point, is they see the other people in person, they go to school, they go to whatever it is they're doing, but there's this background chatter that's there all the time, that never leaves, and they're thinking constantly, what am I missing out on? Right? What else is going on? What are other people saying right now? What's the other story playing out? What do I need to know about? Are they talking about me? Do I need to get on there? What are the group chats I'm not a part of? Who's FaceTiming who? What parties am I not invited to right now? All these things, because social media is constantly in the back of our minds. And because of this device we have in our pockets, we can access those things, but I think it also drives us nuts on the things we're not accessing at all times. Does that make sense? And I'm assuming that you guys, especially, you're seeing this play out where it's not just, again, at school, that bullying is happening. It's not just at school, that these conversations are happening. It's a constant thing. It may get worse when they leave the proximity of their friends instead of better. Does that make sense? Is that, I mean, is that true, first of all? That's just my assumption. But are you seeing that happen? Is that becoming a norm in our society?
If I may, I think what these do, and just my observations with 10 to 15-year-olds that I've seen, is it gives them a chance to be bold and do things they would not do, like the 12-year-old asking that girl for a picture, and then the girl sending, and then him collecting it and sending it to somebody else, and then that going around, and them not really understanding. I think we think as adults that they get how the internet works, but they don't. I think that we think they know it's wrong or right, but I don't think they do. I don't think they really do because I've seen them realize it's all wrong when they're sitting with me and a deputy and we're telling them, you know, it's a felony. You've just sent child pornography to someone else. Do you understand that? And we work really hard so people don't get arrested. Like, we try to, hey, delete that. Let's talk to your parents. Let's try to save that from moving around. And our deputy likes to do a story about the cell towers. I don't know how true it is with him, but he'll go, listen, you send it from here to there, but the cell tower is capturing a bit of that. He goes, we can get a warrant and get information if we need to. But I think it's the boldness that is really frightening, and it frightens themselves when they see that they've been so bold to do a wrong choice. And I feel, and what I see, it's heartbreaking because it takes tragedy or something awful to happen for them to understand. We had a whole week, we had 7 days last year of constant investigation from pictures that were sent from one girl to another boy that then went all around Hernando County. All these people were involved. And so we worked hard chasing it all down and calling in parents that had no idea. They didn't know that Snapchat had a secret place for pictures. They didn't know that someone else could log onto your Snapchat on your phone and you don't even have to have a phone. Or that, yeah, you didn't give your kid a phone, but their friend gave the kid a phone. And everything just kept peeling back and peeling back and peeling back. And it reminds me to a principal I worked with years ago. She says, Facebook's the devil. She goes, all these things are terrible. And, I disagree. I think that there's benefits to everything. But what I notice the most is just the immaturity of the mind and of the soul to be able to handle a gun in their pocket, because this is life or death. You can ruin people's lives immediately with a push of a button. And kids come in the next day, I want to kill myself, I want to hurt. It just opens up so many cans of worms. Mm-hmm. And so, I was sitting there laying in bed last night thinking about, what's the message to share here? What is the message to share, and who's your audience? And anybody here as a parent, my whole thing is, hey, don't give them one. They don't need one. You can give a flip phone that can text. And that's all you need. And then learn to use these. And my question with the kids are, so how has Instagram helped you? Or how are any of these, and just honest, how is this helping you? Tell me how it's helping you. And they don't have any answers. They go, I just know what's happening. Okay, so you know all the bad things that are happening, but is it helping you, And it's a tough, it's a good concept, If it's gonna help you, tell me how it's helping you, but it's not helping them, it's hurting them. It's exposing them. And I don't know the answer at all. I really don't.
Yeah. Well, in your experience, because I think this is something that, at least for a lot of parents, I don't think we fully grasp how common, whether it's legit just sexting, where it's just, texting that way, or it's through apps. How common is that between two people that are sending nude photos or whatever to one another? I mean, how common do you think that is right now?
It's very common.
Yeah,
it's very common, and it's amazing, even the kids who don't have phones or don't have the ability to communicate, how they'll get involved in the conversations. Like, someone will have a phone, the parent might have taken away their phone, they're hanging out, but now they're doing a video together saying, we're gonna come beat your butt up at the park. And now she or he's in it, right? Mm-hmm. And you see that, or And they're going to say these statements that they're not going to do, but it escalates. And then someone else catches that, it's on a Vine, or it's shared, and then it gets likes, or other people comment onto it, and someone might come in and try to stop it, and then they get railed up, and next thing you know, usually for us, it all ends up back at the school, because what are they looking for? Someone to say no. Someone to say no. And so we're the ones that end up saying no, even to the parents, or let the parents know what's happening, and then we educate. It's at that point I go, hey, this is a training ground. Middle school, elementary school, we're training. We're going to make mistakes. We're not going to end your life with this situation that happened. If you get to high school and you send child pornography and you're labeled a sex offender the rest of your life, that's going to mess you up, and that's not going to happen today. We're going to stop that from happening. I work with a great deputy, and that's not going to go down, but we're going to educate you, and we're going to not stop. I don't think you can stop when something like, okay, you stopped your kid from getting the picture, but where did it come from? So you got to follow that vine all the way to where it leads you. I know Kevin and I were talking earlier about human trafficking. You guys were talking about here last week. Those doors start opening up in some of these applications. And when Kevin was talking about all the chatter, it's like having all the doors open in your house, and you can hear things from every direction, and you can't focus on what's happening right in front of you. So until you shut all the applications down, until you shut all the noise down, you're not going to be able to hear God. So this stuff, I think, keeps you from hearing the Holy Spirit speak to us, from hearing God talk to these kids. And I'll be brazen in the public school and say, hey, you go to church, you don't? Okay, you do? Would God be proud of this? Is this something you think God wants this for you? And no, Mr. MacGregor, no. I said, yeah, I don't want that either for you. Here's how we're going to fix this. Here's what we're going to do. But a lot of it, it's like an old gossip. Let's get right down to it. It's a gossip tool. Mm-hmm. It really is. And gossip, it's sinful to be gossiping. And I know so many girls will come to me and say, well, she said this. Okay, well, let's ask her. Did you say that? No, okay. But things blow up because of what other people tell other people online. Mm-hmm. And then it just builds and builds and builds at that, preteen level. That's a lot of the drama. Mm-hmm. And then we sort it out. And we say, let's talk to one another first. Mm-hmm. Let's work this out. Let's be smarter. Let me take your phone for a week, please. I usually have a drawer full. I mean, when I walk through the school, I'll tell you, and they're hanging out the back pockets or whatever, and they hand it over. Oh, it's just the worst. But I know that kid's not going to have any troubles that day. Because sometimes it's the parents texting them at school. Sometimes it's their friends texting them, or they go in the bathroom and text, or get on an app. We're being asked to do them in our work, all the time.
Right.
It's hard to put it down.
Yeah, well, and I mean, Jenessa, I know you're seeing that a lot with the kids you work with, but again, I think, I don't know that if we're not a part of seeing it constantly, that we even really understand how frequent, again, whether it's whatever that looks like, the stuff that's being said and things that are happening, again, that boldness that's being put out there, sending certain photos or whatever's happening, those things are happening. Like, it's not just like well, that other kid does that. This is a lot. I mean, this is a high percentage. I know you're seeing that some with the kids you're working with who come from some, kind of underserved neighborhoods here in Pasco, but you're seeing that being a pretty consistent theme from what I understand. What are you guys kind of experiencing with that? Do you want me to know?
Yeah, so most of the kids that I work with have full access. Most of them have smartphones and have full unrestricted access to whatever they want. And I will often talk with parents, similar to what you're saying, and they will say, well, this is just the age that we live in. They need to figure out how to do this. This is just the new normal. But you're exactly right. There's not a maturity there, right, to be able to handle that level of responsibility and the content that they have access to. And so often I find kids watching very violent videos or pornography or the messaging that's happening online, the bullying that's happening. And like you said, Kevin, I think it is primarily happening on that online space. And even though so much of that, most of the drama that I'm dealing with is coming from that online space, they crave it. They need to go back and say, what are they saying? What could they be saying about me? I think one of the most heartbreaking things I've been seeing lately are young girls that feel very, very pressured to post pictures of themselves so they can be rated. And what's interesting when I talk to them, and I'm sure you see this all the time too, but when I talk to them, they're like so upset about it. They don't want to do it, but it's like, well, how, if I don't, then I'm left out, or how can I compete even, or how can I be seen as valued and important if I don't play the game, or if I don't be a part of that? And that just spirals to a lot of other really, really scary and negative things, especially when we start talking about trafficking. I think that spirals into that really, really scary. So the thing I hear often is just, well, that's just the world we live in. And my biggest encouragement to parents is just that does not have to be the case. Like you said, these kids are craving boundaries. I have found that the kids that I end up closest to, or the kids that I see the most progress in, are the ones where someone in their life is able to say no and set those boundaries. And it's not always easy, but that's definitely, I think, where.
Yeah, and talk about that for just a quick second, because this rating thing, again, if you're not familiar with this, there are literally, like, it is literally, you post a picture so that specifically boys, but I mean anybody, can go on and actually rate, right? Like, I mean, explain that just a little bit.
Yeah, so I think it's probably on lots of apps. I see it frequently on Snapchat.
Yeah.
But it's just that. There's pressure for girls to post a picture, and then boys will go on and rate them, like, it's 1 to 10 or whatever it is, on their attractiveness. And it's just heartbreaking. And girls feel like they have to do it. Like, I've talked to them and they're like, well, if I don't, like, what am I? And it's becoming an identity thing, and so there's just this pressure. I guarantee that it's happening on lots of apps, and we can talk more specifically about apps later.
Yeah. But I mean, that's happening like consistent. This is not just.
Oh yeah, I would say most of the girls that I work with would say, oh, like either they themselves have posted a picture, they've been rated, or they're very aware of like, oh, well, my friend just got an 8, or my friend got, like, I hear that kind of stuff, and it is just heartbreaking. And I would say that it is very common, very, very common.
And I would say the medicine to that, like, so here's this disease that, let's call it what it is a disease of looking for a sense of belonging. You know, like, why would somebody who's not racist join a racist group? For that sense of belonging. You see that people join things that they don't believe in, to have that sense of belonging. It's the most powerful feeling in the world. That's why like you were saying in the study, we crave human interaction, and we need it to live. If we don't, we start falling apart. So what's the medicine of that? And I think it's speaking into kids and giving them, feedback that's not from a phone, and have them involved with groups, and have them involved with things that matter, with people that matter, that people are going to tell them you're important, you're enough, you don't need these things. If someone's saying that, to them, it's a make or break deal. I mean, I have an older daughter who's going to be 20 next week, and I know Risa, I was just thinking about it, she's struggling with screen time right now. I can tell that she still, fights that battle for putting the phone down, and I gotta know. And I tease her because she grew up in the time when this started happening, and she used to make fun of people. Look at that person, they're so addicted to their phone. I'm not going to be one of those people that can't put their phone down. And she was hanging out with us the other night, and she's like this, right? Okay, I can't talk. I got to have all these other things going on, and not an authentic conversation, because I need that feeling, that sense of belonging that my group gives me, whatever that group is, group chat, that group that you're belonging online, whatever app you're using. If we, as the older generation, anybody above these people, can put them in sports, put them in groups, keep them busy, and speak into them, bring them to church and speak God's word in whenever you can, or pray over them. Of course, that's going to make a big difference.
Yeah. There was a study I was looking at the other day from, there's a guy, his name's Johan Hari. He did a TED Talk on this. He wrote this book that was really fascinating. And he was talking about the addiction, the idea of addiction that we have, and how it's wrong, how everything we've learned about addiction is not correct. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this at some point, Gary, but this idea of addiction, we've been taught that there's chemicals in drugs, and the drugs then have these chemicals that make us addicted to those drugs. So once those chemicals are in us, we crave those chemicals once again. We're just going to want that. And so he said that the study that came from was actually one done like way back in like the 30s and 40s. They did studies with rats. They would put a rat in a cage, and then they would say they would have that one rat, and they would have 2 water bottles. And one water bottle would just be water, and the other would have drugs in the water. And that rat would consistently choose Once it had the one with drugs in it, it would choose that over and over again. And that's what we thought was, now that it's had the drugs, it's going to be addicted to those drugs. But in the 70s, there was a professor, and he decided that this study was done wrong. And he came along and he took, what he said was, the problem was that they only did isolated rats. That was the problem. And so what he did is he took a bunch of rats and made a little rat park, is what he called it. He called it Rat Park. And they had like cheese, and they had like balls to play with, they had things to do, they had other friends, and they put a bunch of rats in Rat Park. And then they did the same experiment. There was the water and there was the drug water. And the rats never chose the drug water over the regular water. Not a single time. None of them got hooked on it, none of them stuck with it. And this was how rats, the idea was that sobriety is not the opposite of addiction. Connection to people is the opposite of addiction. In fact, they did the same study with Vietnam veterans. In Vietnam, it was estimated that about 25% of the Vietnam soldiers between the UK and the US were using heroin consistently. Like, they were always using heroin. That was a normal part of their day-to-day. So when they came back home, it was like, well, they're going to keep using heroin. We're going to have thousands and thousands of people. We got to figure out how to do this drug treatment. They followed those soldiers back home. Only 5% were still addicted once they got home. Where'd it go? Like, was it just really great rehab? In fact, some of the drugs that you're given if you go into for like severe surgery, they are the same exact drugs as heroin. Like, same exact drug, not anything different. In fact, it's stronger than heroin, the drug you're given, because street heroin is kind of watered down, it's diluted. What you're given is pure medical grade heroin. And I don't know about your grandma, my grandma just had a hip replacement. She was given essentially heroin, same thing as heroin, after her hip replacement. And she's not hooked on heroin today. She left the hospital, she's fine. It wasn't the chemical, it was the connection. Right? And so he was saying that essentially what we've understood about this is altogether maybe wrong, that what we need to do is not worry about the addiction as far as that goes. And maybe that's where social media the same way. I think we get addicted to phones, to technology. It literally is an addiction. That has been proven time and again that this is an addiction. So if this is an addiction, maybe the addiction is not to the phone or to the social media or to the screen. The addiction is to the lack of actual connection happening, like real, actual human connection, because that's the opposite of addiction. So I don't know if you're seeing that, if this is becoming a substitute for that, or what you're seeing, if you see those things, of how those things play out with what you're experiencing.
Well, I think the key word there is when you assess real addiction, you'll see isolation. You don't need anybody else. All you need is that drug, that alcohol, that fix, whatever. And in isolation, we humans are not good. And sometimes we want our self-time, we want our alone time, and we withdraw, and sometimes that's healthy, but it really needs to be time limited, because isolation is really the problem. And when we're looking at those addictive behaviors, and that's, what do we hear so often? The teenager who spends all their time in their bedroom, disconnected from their family, playing video games, or in their social media, they're isolating. And kind of something you were saying, we can lose the ability to know what's real and what's not anymore. But I'll speak a little more on the isolation. I used to work in a juvenile detention center. Young men that had murdered, raped, molested children, sold drugs, every crime imaginable. And I wish I had a delete button, but it was the thing that stuck with me is in counseling them and talking with them. It was just overwhelming. It was in isolation where they would sit there and ruminate and conjure, and then they would go out. In isolation, because we have nothing to bounce stuff off of, no one else to say, hey, this is a good idea, this is a bad idea. And so isolation really is the enemy. Do you want me, I can speak a little bit to the brain chemistry of addiction. In counseling, we have what we call the DSM, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual. We just call it the DSM because I can barely. But anyway, they don't come out with a new edition very often. They came out with 5 here a couple years ago. radically interesting, but I'll not go there. But what we have diagnosed as mental disorders and how we've changed and all that. And I can speak to social anxiety and generalized anxiety and all that. But with just sticking with the addiction thing, well, the diagnostic manual is global. It's not just US. It's you have a mental disorder anywhere on planet Earth, and it's in that manual. And they're already looking at revising it. And I don't know if you can understand, they do not revise, they do not produce this DSM diagnostic manual very often. I mean, sometimes a decade or more. And so it's only been out a few years, and already they want to revise it. I don't love the term. I think it needs to be more inclusive, but they're calling it gaming disorder. But it really relates to the whole electronic device, whether it's the computer, the iPad, the TV, the gaming system, the cell phone. Electronic devices, they've discovered, stimulate our brain. And our happy brain chemistry, dopamine, this brain chemical, fires off, and that's our happy. We feel good. And when you're successful at something, your brain fires off dopamine. Hey, I like success, it feels good. But here our electronic devices are going in, stimulating the pleasure center in our brain, and it's the same pleasure center in the brain that drugs and alcohol stimulate. So yeah, it has created this addictive behavior. You know, worst case, terrible scenarios, law enforcement and first responders going to a car crash site, removing the body with their cell phone still in hand, with half a text. And they've smashed into another vehicle or lost control completely. We're addicted to these devices, but the basal ganglia, that's kind of the part of the brain that controls a lot of stuff, and it will fire off dopamine when it brings in good stimulus and says, okay, here's some dopamine, here's a good feeling. And then the amygdala, this other part of the brain that deals with pain and emotion and all that, this electronic device stimulates this dopamine, and then it reduces this sense and focus on pain in the amygdala. So the amygdala is happy, the basal ganglia is happy, and then they gang up on the prefrontal cortex up here where we do our real thinking and reasoning as human beings. We got one of those, not every creature has one of those, and convinces our reasoning that, hey, the basal ganglia likes it, the amygdala likes it, so the prefrontal cortex gives in and says, okay, I guess it must be good. And so we have this whole culture that we think technology is just the greatest thing, and we just bought into it, hook, line, and sinker, and it's created an addiction. Maybe you've seen some phones that blue light filter. It blocks this blue light, this particular hue of blue light that comes from our electronic devices is actually hindering our natural release of melatonin, which is your natural go-to-sleep mechanism at night. So yeah, they're up till 13 o'clock playing on their social media. I mean, sometimes,
14 o'clock.
yeah, it's amazing because it's blocking that natural release of the melatonin so they don't get sleepy. And I confess, Kevin, there's times I'm sitting there goofing around on my phone and I have to put it away from me, face down, and sit there and be bored for about 15 minutes. And then finally I start to relax, like, okay, I can go to bed. This is a practice this guy here has to do. I have to release that thing, you know, and let it go. But there's a lot to this addiction where they're looking at it as creating a serious mental disorder, the addictive behavior. But the isolation is really key. When we see that, that's where it needs to be addressed.
Well, I think that's what's so hard is like, I think obviously they go hand in hand, right? The addiction, the isolation. And we're seeing, so I mean, I mentioned this morning that, like you said, we've just kind of assumed that this thing's okay, right? We've been given social media. Again, for me, I was a .edu guy, and I signed up for Facebook, and I'm like, it's going to be good. I'm just going to keep up with a few friends. And at that point, it was like before, like my mom was on Facebook, so it was still kind of cool and had that like appeal. Now, like my grandma's on Facebook, and it's not as cool, kind of thing. But like that was the era, right? It was like a cool thing to do. I remember like with Instagram. I remember like early on adopting into Instagram. I was one of the first few thousand people in America to be on Instagram. And we were taking pictures, and it was actually for photographers. It was like a thing for photographers. And we would post pictures, and every day there'd be a top 9 on Instagram. And if you made on that top 9 page, everybody would like pay attention because your picture was actually good. They actually cared about the picture. It was crazy. I know this is like weird now. And so like I remember those things. It was like it started off as something that was normal. Now we're in this place where it's like, again, I think it's run us more than we run it. I think it's taken us over more than we control it. And I mentioned this morning, but I was reading a Harvard researcher on social media, and one of the things he said it's like somebody built a car and put all of America into it, and then pushed the car down the hill and then said, oh, we actually don't have any seatbelts. Like, we don't know if it's going to work or not. You might be fine, you might not. But that's where we're at with social media. We don't know the long-term effects. We don't know in 25 years what this thing's going to do to us. What you're talking about right now is we just kind of assumed, our brain said, it's probably fine, but we didn't really do any hard reasoning on, is it fine? Is this a good idea? And now we're going down the hill with no seatbelts, being like, maybe we're all going to turn out just fine, no big deal. Or maybe this is going to take a massive toll on our personal relationships, on our private lives, on all kinds of things. And that isolation is so concerning to me, because I think, what you guys were talking about, Jenessa, when you mentioned, especially, and I just want to get this in there really quickly, this is not necessarily just social media related, but I do think that we have to understand the importance of isolation with phones. When I remember when cell phones started to get the capability to have internet on them, right? Anywhere you were by yourself. In the book of James, it says that you will be drug away and enticed by your desires. So that's what the book of James says, is you're going to be drug away. Where are you drug away from? Other people, right? You're drug away and you're enticed by your desires. When are you most susceptible to making bad choices? Actually, a lot of times it's like when you're by yourself and you have something that can allow that. In about 5 years ago, there was a Rolling Stone study, this is from Rolling Stone, that was looking at the habits of 11-year-olds on Google. The number one search of 11-year-olds on Google, this 5 years ago, was Hannah Montana, was the name, Hannah Montana. The number 2 search was just the word porn. 11-year-olds. Number 2 search was just the word porn. That's 11-year-olds. Now, they may not know what that means. They may. They may have just heard the word. But either way, they were given a device that can get them to it. That's the craziest part. And so they could be by themselves and make this choice. The porn industry was thrilled, for one, when cell phones started having this ability to go anywhere on the internet. They loved this. I remember hearing Ron Jeremy, if you know who Ron Jeremy is, he's a big time porn producer. He was thrilled. And he talked about how porn was leading the way on technology for the world. He was very proud of it, because we've made mobile sites before anybody else, and we're getting it out there for everybody to have access. They were the first ones because they realized, I guarantee you they realized, that you used to have to walk into a bookstore and look somebody in the eye and buy a magazine. Now you can drive off into a dead end and pull out a phone and nobody ever sees you. If you don't think that people you know or children you have are not accessing this, if they have full unrestricted access to the internet, I'm just going to tell you you're wrong. I'm just flat out wrong. If they have unrestricted access, right now there's almost no way, statistically speaking even, just for men in America, it's almost impossible that that's not something that's happened or is happening. It's just something you have to be careful of. So I know that's not social media related, but I do want to talk about the social media stuff we're seeing that is leading to that. As we had Sheriff Wilkett, he was here, Corporal Wilkett, a few weeks ago, and he talked about this with the human trafficking, some of the most dangerous apps. But some of these apps that are happening on phones, I do think it's important for parents to know the ones that, like, if you saw them right now, especially you guys, you'd be like, oh no, don't let your kid have that thing. So, Jenessa, can you talk about a couple of those real quick that you've experienced, and I want Andrew to talk about that as well, but.
Yeah, so some of these Corporal will get talked about, and there's a couple that are really dangerous that I feel like kids are they're maybe a little less interested in, like WhatsApp. But WhatsApp is one of the ones that traffickers target the most, or just predators in general target the most, because it doesn't require using data, so you can hide it. You can't track someone on the other end. So kids are often having conversations with people they think they know, but they don't. So that is one I find that kids use the most when they're trying to hide their activity with their parents. I see that a lot. Others that are pretty dangerous are this one called Kik. Kik I don't see any positive use for at all. Again, it's for to message secretly. I encourage you to look up. I often use Common Sense Media to just kind of get a gauge on different apps. That's really helpful. But the one that all of the kids that I work with get so mad when I talk negatively about is TikTok, because I'm sure you see students on it all the time. It is so popular right now, and it's fun, and it's just singing at each other. But I think it's so risky. And I've been super nervous about, I have so many kids on TikTok, and it used to be called Musical.ly. You can look back on that too. They changed it to TikTok. They combined. But there's a lot that goes into that. So there are privacy settings. It's not necessarily a horrible thing. It could be a really fun thing. But most of the kids I work with are not using the privacy settings. And so anyone can comment on their videos. Most of the comments are sexual in nature or just cruel. And so it's not an encouraging thing for these kids. And so the goal is that they can just kind of sing back and forth with each other, have this interaction, but in the comment section, and also the content and videos they can access, and even the songs that they're singing to, often is not age appropriate. It's really not even geared for kids younger than 13. I would say it's extremely popular right now for elementary age kids. I know very few elementary age kids that aren't so excited about it, but technically they're not even supposed to be on it. So that's a big one. I was just at a conference, and I never even thought about this to have to talk about in this kind of setting, but dating apps. I was recently at a conference, and they told me that the age requirement for Tinder is 13. If you're familiar with Tinder, that's not something you want your child to be anywhere near. I'm not saying that all dating apps are bad. That's not what I'm saying at all, but the fact that that conversation has to be had when talking about kids and teens is really scary. And so the biggest thing with all of that I would encourage you, again at this conference, they spent a lot of time talking about, you may think your kids are on these apps, but they don't necessarily need to have a phone to be on them, right? They may have different usernames. I know a lot of kids that have one Instagram that's for mom, and the other Instagram where they show some other content. And so they have multiple accounts just to be able to put out in front of parents. Corporal Wilkett talked about the calculator app. That hides other apps, and I was actually just messing with it today. I have a friend that's engaged, and she doesn't want her future husband to see her wedding dress, so she downloaded the calculator app, and she hides all of her wedding dress pictures in there, and she can just punch in a little code, and then it reveals this vault, and she can get into those pictures. Now, that's harmless, but I guarantee if you have a teen that's using the calculator app, they're not hiding their wedding dress pictures. They're hiding things you do not want them to have. And they can hide other apps, they can hide photos, and it just looks exactly like a calculator. You type in a code into the calculator, and it opens up a vault into lots of different things. There's a lot like that. There are tons of resources online where you can research this. Unfortunately, fortunately, there are great restrictions you can put in place, and there are also a lot of tools for kids to break those, like jailbreaking phones and all this. So my biggest encouragement to you is to read up on that. It's not fun, but it is the reality, and it's just heartbreaking when I hear parents say, well, this is just the world that we live in, because it does not have to be that way.
Yeah, and Andrew, I know you've talked about some of those apps, and if you can share about that, but also, again, your kid doesn't have to have it on their phone to be able to access it. They're switching phones, there's a lot going on. What are you seeing inside the school with that stuff, with those apps?
Yeah, they do hand the phones around. The kid will he or she may not have phone access, but then how are they making comments? How did that happen? We talk to the parents, well, they borrowed Gary's phone to do that, or I lent Gary my phone for the day. I see that several times, like, how are you still involved? How am I seeing you on Snapchat? We thought you had this discipline, you're done, your parents got your phone. Well, you borrowed little Susie's phone to start making comments because it was important. Snapchat's one too that has like a little secret picture place in there. Honestly, I feel like when I look at my almost to be 20-year-old and have a 4-year-old, and Ava, the oldest, she grew up in this whole, I'll never forget, I coached girls soccer, a travel team for a while, and that in itself was, 12 to 15-year-old girls traveling, 20 of them, and all that's, so kind of was really doing well. And one of her friends had sent a picture to a boy, and this is kind of just when this started happening. And she was really afraid to let me know about it in the car, but she did. We pulled over the car, we called her dad, let him know what was going on, and that was like a real big moment for her and I, because we were just traveling to Kentucky at the time, stopped and had a big talk about all of this. If I had to do it again, and I will be doing it again, I'm going to take the phone, and if I'm buying my child a phone, because why do we give them a phone? I want to be able to reach them. What if there's an emergency? Right? Isn't that the whole reason? Like, you're separated from your kid, and we're like, we got phones at the school. They can call. You can call us.
Right.
Well, they're walking home. Something might happen. Okay, I'll give you that. All right. So let's have a talk. The kid. We need to sit down with our kids and say, before you have this, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to be able to see everything you can do on your phone. And you can set your phone up with that, like that. And I think that's the way you have to do it. And have them reach different levels. You get to be 15, okay, you can do Snapchat now, but I need to be able to watch all of this. But it's the dialogue, not the excuse, like, well, it's just the way it is, right? And you do hear that all the time, and mostly the parents don't want to have the fight with the kid. And where does that come from? Well, look back to about when they're 3 or 4, and that parent is starved for some of their own me time, some selfish time. We've all put on the television, watch this for an hour. Here's the tablet, here's this. And then you take it away. Okay, here you go. Okay, good, next time. And then, it's back and forth. You don't want to hear that. You don't want to hear that, so here, just take it, be quiet. All right, they're good. Oh, they're good on the tablet. Well, they're savvy. They start figuring stuff out. Their friends tell them, and they learn a lot quicker. But they've had nobody guiding them. No one to tell them no. I was trying to remember where that quote came from. It was from The Outsiders. If you've ever read that book, there's a point in there where they said, why do you guys keep fighting? Why do you keep doing this? Because no one's telling them no. And we have to be the ones that say no to ourselves first. Like, no, I'm not going to let media babysit you. No, I'm not going to let the phone babysit you. I can give you a flip phone that's got my number, your number in it, and text and 911, and we're good. And you'll grow up just fine.
Yeah.
You really will. And it's something that won't leave me alone. We were talking about loneliness. And this is just maybe my own experience. But I know if you're alone, and you're separated, and you're isolated, and you don't have that sense of belonging, I believe spiritually we have angels around us. And there's one that's going to guide us. If we listen and say, Holy Spirit, help me make the right decision. But if I've got a device on here, if I got a phone that's really it's no morality, it's just it's nothing. It's not going to give you anything. And the creators are humans, so it's obviously flawed. And if you're alone, you're going to start getting bad advice, make bad decisions, because you don't have anybody to join you and invite Christ into the room with you and make that call. And that's where we get into that scary world of like active shooters and these kids that start to go deep into the darkness because they've been in the darkness and no one's reached in to help them, or we know and we're scared to go into the darkness and help them. Because these things, I can tell you the top 15 kids in my school right now, and we work on them every day. You're great, you're doing good. Good to see you have your phone put away. Last year they hated me. Why is he so crazy about the phones? Why is Mr. MacGregor so crazy about everybody's phone? Blah, blah, blah. But this year they're putting them away, and not in the back pockets, in the backpack. And believe me, I've caught so much grief from parents on both sides, but I really think it's a war worth fighting, because I think it's a war for souls. I think in that isolation that we start losing souls. And my prayer is wherever this goes today, that somebody that's alone, or someone that knows someone that's alone, and they're looking for companionship or spiritual connection or a sense of belonging or some answer, they're not going to look here, you know. Even if you got the Bible app here, great, that's wonderful. But there's so many other distractions, you know, so many other bad ideas that get, you know, if I don't have you on the stage, I'm up here alone, I might make a bad choice because I'm just not smart enough.
Yeah, I don't think that's kind of my gut, is that I don't think it's an actual substitute for human interaction. I think there still is a level of us that wants actual face-to-face human interaction. There are studies that people who are more social, have more social anxiety or more depressed, are more likely to look at screens more frequently, and vice versa. Those who look at screens more frequently have higher levels of social anxiety and depression. They go hand in hand. The correlation is right there. It's right in front of us. And I think what we start to do is we start to let the things on the screen substitute for actual human interaction. They start to become that way. I shared, we were talking about this in our office, guys. We have an office now this week over in the old dorm over here in the college. I mean, it's fancy. It's like real fancy. It's a dorm room. And we were talking about it, and I shared this because I heard this story, and this, I'm going to warn you, it's a little bit graphic, but it broke my heart. That there was a person who, let's just say this. So the porn industry has actually been not doing as well financially recently because porn producers are losing money because you can access so many things for free now, right? You can find things for free. You don't have to buy their stuff anymore, so they're losing money. So some of them have to get creative with how they make money. And so one of them started a thing where you could write in and you could request a video, and they would make a custom video for you. If you paid their amount, they would make a custom video for you. So they said what was weird is it wasn't as like graphic or sexual as you might think. It was just weird stuff. Where it was like one guy was like, I really want to see a girl who's in a kid's pool who just gets ketchup and mustard squirted all over her. That's what I want to see. And she actually had clothes on, and they were like, okay, like if you pay the money, we'll do the thing. I mean, it's weird, but that's your thing, I guess, and you paid money. So they did this, and then they've done other things. Like there was one guy who thought that his stamp collection was kind of nerdy, so he wanted the girls, he wanted 3 girls to be hired for a video to rip up his stamp collection on video, and they'd kind of make fun of him, and then he'd be like, oh, those hot girls don't think that's cool, so therefore I don't think it's cool, so I'll stop having stamp collections. Okay, so weird stuff, I get it. But one night, in the middle of the night, the producers, they're a husband and wife team who make these adult films, got an email from a man, and it came into the middle of the night, and it said, I'm going to kill myself. I need a video of somebody telling me not to. And so they called a girl who they worked with who had herself been suicidal. And they said, we need you instantly, we need to make a video now. We need to create this like right now. And so they went to this house up on this hill. It was this beautiful day, and they had her sit there, again, with clothes on, sit there, and she started to talk to the camera and talk about how she had gone through this and how detrimental this was for her, and she had experienced suicidal thoughts, and she had thought about taking her own life at different points. And she explained all this on video. They made the video, they sent it to the man, they never heard back. They don't know if he lived or died. But the fact that his closest actual connection, when he's in his most dire moment, is to reach through a screen to somebody else on the other side of a camera or a screen, and that's who he thinks of to reach out to in one of his lowest moments, because he apparently doesn't have actual human connections. And this is a person like in our society, this is where we're at. We've created synthetic, substitutionary relationships where there's supposed to be humans that we would talk to, right? This is a moment you need to talk to a person. You need a person sitting in your living room saying, don't do this, this isn't a good idea, we love you, we're here for you, we care about you. And all he can think of is to send an email to get a girl on a video to tell him, who he's never met before, to tell him that he shouldn't tell himself. I mean, that's where we're at. It's crazy, right? And that's, unfortunately, I know that's a graphic story of like maybe the worst case scenario, but it's still happening in our culture. I think it's when this thing is taken to its worst, to its zenith, to the worst it could be, that's what it can look like. That's how bad it can really get. If we're not careful with understanding the difference between a human connection, somebody talking to you and being there and actually having real conversation face to face with you. You know, with media, we see that it's a replacement for other things. All media replaces something else. That's what media does. Or if you ever study, there's a guy named Marshall McLuhan. He's brilliant. Go read his books. He was in the 70s. He like predicted the internet before the internet. It's fascinating stuff. He was brilliant. But he wrote this whole thing about media. He said that media always replaces something else. So media is an extension of who you are. That's what media is. It's an extension of one of your senses. That's what all media is. Media is an extension of your senses. And at some level, it replaces something that's already existed. And we were talking about this in my living room this week, and it was fascinating because like I was like, what is social media replaced? What kind of media has that replaced? And Kelly was like, well, you know, like I don't like, you know, have to like send people birthday cards anymore because Facebook tells me it's their birthday, and then I just go on and post like it's their happy birthday, and I just save myself, you know, postage. And that is nice. There's nice things like that that are very simple or whatever, very easy. But then there's things where it's like, or there's personal conversations that I've just replaced, right? Like, so if I see that my friend has a baby, I just see it on Facebook, and I'm like, oh, they had a baby. And I click like, I might even say, congrats. I might find a really cool gift to put in the comments, but I don't reach out to them anymore, right? There would have been a day where you would have called them and said, wait, so you're having a baby? That's great, right? We don't do that. When people are in difficult situations, I don't know about you, I found myself doing this just recently. This is a terrible admission, but some people we went to college with, some friends of ours. I started some serious Facebook stalking because I was like, I think they're getting divorced. I think they're split up. He's not in any of her pictures. She's not in any of his pictures. You know what I'm talking about? I can't be the only one doing this, but okay. Yeah, it's like this is real. But what would we have done before? If we heard that, we might have called them. We might have gotten together with them. We might have sat in their living room and cried with them and been like, I can't believe this is happening to you. I'm so sorry that this didn't work out. What's happening? How can I help? What can I be in the middle of? Instead of Facebook stalking it and then being like, I think they're divorced. I think they're having troubles in their marriage. That's what we're doing. This is synthetic relationship. Does that make sense? I don't know that social media is actually creating a more social world. If we're being completely honest, like what we need from social interactions. I don't know that's happening. And yeah,
even if you break it down like the old bulletin boards, you know, like your local community, like, hey, here's what's happening in the news, a little flyer, right? You eventually had to get and meet with somebody. Mm-hmm. You know, you'd get the news, or you'd post your news there and maybe communicate, but then it was like the part you were looking forward to is the gathering.
Yeah.
You know, the human interaction, the talking, smiling, being real.
Yeah. And the more our kids are growing up in this, I think the more there's danger to it for sure, but there's also just detriment to it. That if we let people fall too far into this, they might miss out on what actual human connection is. And I don't know if there's a substitute for it. I don't know if there's just another way to do it. I think it just is what it is. Do you have any thoughts on that, Gary? I know you're
Well, I was just
about this.
thinking, and you may even know the exact statistic better than me, but it's over 90% of our communication is body language.
Mm-hmm.
What we say, these words I'm speaking, is a very small percentage of my communication.
Mm-hmm.
My body language, my voice tone, you know, you're reading that, you're sensing that. So if it's a text, how many times? Well, it sounds like in the text they're being mean or they're being.
Right.
How can we perceive emotion through a text?
You gotta put a ton of emojis in there.
Yeah. I guess that's why they have the emojis, but it's blocking a lot when we don't have that connection, because there's a lot more to communication than just the text.
Yeah. So what I want to kind of just wrap up with real quick is I think the goal is not to produce more anxiety in us. Is to be like, oh, this thing's terrible, this is the worst, and now we have more anxiety. The goal is to have less anxiety. The goal is to have, like, not let this thing become something that creates more anxiety inside of us. And I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on this. What I'd love to hear is if there are best practices. Like, what would you say as a suggestion to individuals, to parents, to children, whatever it is, what would you say is a best practice you've seen or a thing that you would suggest? If you were to say this is probably the best way to manage the world we live in, the media we have, what would you suggest? Do you guys have any thoughts on that?
I think it's important for us to realize that these electronic devices are stimulating our brain. Let's start there. Let's admit that. Let's own that. That's not good or bad, but we have to realize our electronic devices are stimulating our brains. And so it's creating that kind of addictive behavior. And best practices is turning the volume off, turning the vibrate mode off, putting it face down, and putting it away from us. Kelly and I went to a restaurant on our date night one time, and we realized what we were doing. We're both waiting on the food, and we're both staring into our phones. This is our date night. We're out together to have dinner, and we're both staring into our phones. But fortunately, we realized what we're doing. Like, turn that thing off, put it away, and spend time with each other. But at night, you set a time. This phone needs to be turned off. These electronic devices need to be turned off. We need to stop that blue light, effect on our brains. When they analyze or the criteria in diagnosing social anxiety, generalized anxiety, which is 20% of Americans, and it's rising. About 20% of America is dealing with generalized anxiety disorder, and it's on the rise. 25% is experiencing depression, and it's on the rise. In the time that we've been here, 6 people ended their lives. Purposefully decided to commit suicide while we sat here. These are serious, real issues, but the answer is we're smarter than our smartphones, or we got to realize we are. We are smarter than our electronics. Put the stinking things away, turn them off, set up boundaries. One of the criteria I was going to say, and it's not even a very good criteria, but if someone has trouble that it's at 3 hours, if they can't leave their phone alone for 3 hours, they probably are suffering from social media anxiety. I'm like, 3 hours? We got to dial that baby back a lot, because people are going a matter of minutes and they're shaking if they don't check it. But I think boundaries, I hope that's
Yeah, absolutely.
the word that
Absolutely.
helps.
Yeah, do you guys have any thoughts what you would suggest or what you would recommend as best practices?
Yeah, I think specifically with kids and families, one would be to have those restrictions on the phone set. As you were saying, you can see everything that your child is doing. Excuse me. So having those restrictions set, doing the research, like actually taking the time to do the research on the apps that your kids are interested in and engaging in that with them. The best advice I've been given, and I've been talking with parents, is to also ask a lot of questions about who's following them or what requests they're accepting and all that. How do you know them? Where did you meet them? What do you know about them? Because that mutual friend business can be kind of a dangerous game. Kids think, oh, well, this person knows them, so they must be a safe person or whatever. And so to include yourself in those conversations with your kids, so even if it's not just a firm no, it's okay, let's have further conversation about this, or how can I engage this with you? For me personally with social media, apart from kids and families, I think using social media as a bridge for actual connection, and I think that's a lot easier said than done, but as Kevin said, like if you see something, let it be a nudge to pick up the phone or knock on the door. One of the most encouraging things that I've seen in social media, and it's not perfect, but people using the Nextdoor app. So I work in neighborhoods, and the whole goal of working in neighborhoods is that neighborhoods are safer and stronger when people know each other. There's less crime, there's less poverty, there is strength in people actually knowing who their neighbors are. And I think that is so true even beyond just the context of a neighborhood. And so the goal of the Nextdoor app is that people would know who lives down the street. But the problem is if they never actually get out of their house, if they never actually go knock on the door, that is useless. It's just another Facebook. But it's encouraging to me that that's the goal. So fortunately, in my job, I get to sit around tables with people in the neighborhood every week, and I am seeing people want to connect with each other beyond the internet. And so for me personally, I've tried to take that example and see what other people are doing and say, okay, how can I pick up the phone, knock on the door? Again, a lot easier said than done.
Yeah, right. That's good.
I would use the metaphor that if we lived in a house or an area we knew there was lots of wolves around, and at night we would make sure that our gate was shut, our doors were shut, that we were armed properly, we'd taken all the precautions. We don't do anything like that with these phones. We know there's a wolf in the phone and the media and everything on here, yet we don't take any of the precautions. And we're trying to figure out how to do that, and we got to learn how to protect our children and protect ourselves as well. I mean, any of us could go and be attacked on social media. I know I personally have, and the best way to engage that is not engage it. Not to open those doors. So I figured the best way to protect yourself is to bring as much light as you can to the situation and with your family, and talk to them about it and share about it and work your way through it. And don't be afraid to have those conversations with anyone, kids or whomever, and check yourself. Like doing this today is thinking, how long can I get off these? I did a Facebook fast before. Maybe I just need to get rid of it. Maybe we need to take a bold step tonight when we leave and say, what can we do without? And then see how your self reacts when you think you might do that. And that's probably the one you need to get rid of.
Yeah, it's fascinating. About 2 years ago, the number one tech invention by Wired magazine was the thing called the light phone. And the light phone came out, and the light phone, if you're not familiar with what it is, it's like about the size of a credit card, and it only has your 10 digits on it, and it has the pound sign and the star key like it used to have, right? Like an old cell phone. It's a credit card. It's flat. It's this little thing, and it costs like $200. And what would happen is people were buying these. They actually sold out of them. They did a Kickstarter to get it going. They sold out of them immediately, and they are just a phone that what it's designed to do is link to your smartphone, so you have the same phone number or whatever, and you can set times on it. So if I say at 5 o'clock, I want my smartphone to stop being smart, and then it will forward to this little credit card, and all the credit card can do is call. It cannot take texts. It cannot do social media. It has no internet. It has 9 numbers saved in it if you need numbers saved in it, and that's it. And what's crazy is our people in our society were smart enough to figure out, first of all, we needed this. Secondly, to charge us $200 for something that we basically already have on our phones, but they know we're not smart enough to have the willpower to do it, and they sold out of it. The people in our society were like, I want to disconnect. I actually see the value of disconnecting from my smartphone for even small amounts of time. For me, like I talked about this morning, I was being run around by my phone. I realized when I woke up in the morning, it was the first thing that I checked. My alarm would go off. I would see the text messages. I would see the emails. I would see the notifications that my phone gave me. It was the first thing I thought about, and it ran me around. From that point on in the day, I was following its agenda for me instead of it following my agenda for it, right? We buy the phones, we pay for the phones, but the phones really control us a lot of times. And I was following whatever it told me to do. That was how my morning ran for a while, and that was just not okay. So for our family, it was, okay, we need to have a common place that we put all of our electronics, so our kids see me doing that. Before they go to bed, they see me putting my phone there, so that they know it's not just them, it's me too. That goes in the basket just like all their electronics. Everything goes in the basket, and we will see it again tomorrow when it's time to see it. But not before that, and it will not be the first thing that's in our hands. It will be something that comes at the right time. Those are, I think that for us, just the unrestricted internet access, all this stuff terrifies me anyways. So that's just something I would be concerned about. But there might be some things, it's hard, but I would guarantee there's probably some things that might take some actual elimination and just calling it what it is and getting rid of some things. So, anyways, I want to just wrap up tonight and just pray for us as we leave. And I want to say thank you guys for just sharing your experience, your expertise, the things you guys have been studying on this stuff as well, and what you guys have personally lived through, but also what you're seeing with the people that you come in contact with. So thank you for sharing that. Let me pray for us before we head out. Jesus, I thank you for this evening. I thank you for this time. And I just thank you for a chance to renew our minds, to say, as we sit back and look at what are the patterns of this world, the things that have had us in their grasp, the things that maybe we just let slide in, honestly. What are those things? And to allow us to just have a second to pull back and look at them with fresh eyes and say, is this beneficial, or is this something we need, or is this just something we've let ourselves fall into? And Jesus asked that if there are things that we need to eliminate, if there are things that we need to regulate, or just to put in perspective again, I pray that you would give us the boldness and the courage to be able to do that. Pray you give us the conversations and the words to be able to handle these things as parents, as friends, as adults, even as spouses, that as we have these conversations, we be able to handle them the right way. Pray for each one of us that we would be able to have mindsets that are renewed, that they're not just looking just like the rest of the world, but they would look like something that's different and that's following a different way, and it's your way. And so I pray that we'd be able to create the space by eliminating other things, that we'd create space where we can just know your way and give space to the things that are important by eliminating the things that aren't. So I thank you so much for this time. I pray that you would just be with us this week as we kind of venture through this and we try some things out and we figure out what's the right thing for us, the right path for us this week. Praise things in your name. Amen.